Can everybody hear me okay? Without the mic? If you can't hear me, I'll use the mic, but it sounds like everybody can hear me. Okay. So welcome everybody here tonight. It's great to see so many faces and hear people's concerns about our groundwater. So we hope it's a good evening of discussion and dialogue amongst all of us. So start out, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Steve Kissel. I'm a Thank you. My name is Steve Kissel. I'm a resident here in Stewards Sunsites area. I live about 5 miles northwest of the community center here. And my wife and I have lived here started part-time over 22 years, full-time now. But I'm a lifelong resident of Arizona. I wasn't born here, but I've lived here almost 60 years. And my father was a hydrologist, and I learned how precious our groundwater was from him, and I've carried that lesson. And of course, all of us in the desert realize how precious groundwater, any water is here in the desert, whether it's coming from the sky or coming from the ground. So with that, let me introduce the group here that's sponsoring this forum tonight. We're the Cochise Groundwater Stewards, and we're a local grassroots community. We have no backing from anyone. We're just local residents getting together, a community group dedicated to a sustainable water policy for eastern Cochise County, really the whole county, but we're focusing our work right now on eastern Cochise County, mostly the Douglas and Wilcox Basins. And we're working to create a strong network, getting folks organized into a strong network of well-informed neighbors that are committed to the stewardship of our precious groundwater. So the more we all know about the groundwater situation, the more we are connected together, the more effective we're going to be at making change. And I think you'll understand after we finish our presentation why that change is necessary. We believe that a sustainable water policy for this county is essential for good business and for everyone, and it's critical to the long-term viability of our communities. So this isn't just about, without water we can't have a good economy, without water we can't have vital, growing and thriving communities. You know, we're already hearing stories of people moving out because of the water situation. So we don't want that to continue to get worse. And we invite all of you in the community to help us with this endeavor. We'll talk more about that later. Some of you I saw signing on a contact list. We'll talk about some of the other ways you can stay in touch with us. All right, I'm going to do a short poll. First thing I want to ask, and just show of hands. So on a scale of beginner, or introductory, whatever you want to call it, to advanced, so beginning, intermediate, and advanced, how would you rate your knowledge of the groundwater situation here in the Sulphur Springs Valley? So how many people think that, and a beginner would be someone who knows there's a problem, and has maybe read a few things, a few neighbors have talked to you about it, but you really don't know much more beyond that. How many would you beginners? Okay, good, good. No problem. This is why I'm assuming this is why you're here, and hopefully by when you leave, you'll feel you're maybe in the intermediate range. So how many of you are on the other side of that? You consider yourself advanced, kind of maybe an expert. You could be up here doing this like me. Don't be shy, Fred Michael, Melanie. Okay, don't be shy. And then how many of you feel like you're in the middle? You know something, but you don't know as much as you want. Okay. All right, so you can see we're at the first group here. And the idea tonight is that we want to help bring us all up to that level, like Zach and some of the others, Melanie and a few others. Okay. All right, let's just get a show of hands. There's 2 groundwater basins within the Sulphur Springs Valley. There's the Wilcox Basin and the Douglas Basin. And some of you may already know this, but bear with me. The Wilcox Basin extends from all the way north to where the Mount Graham, the Penaleno Mountains, all the way north through Wilcox, Cochise, Dragoon, Dos Cabezas, Kansas Settlement, all the eastern side of the Chiricahuas, down to Sunzona, and we'll swing back over here to Pierce, Sunsites, and Richland, that area. So how many of you live in that, what I just described? Okay, that's majority. How many don't live there? Okay, okay. So that's, I know these guys, I know this guy. They're in the Douglas Basin, so let me describe Douglas Basin, just so you know the difference when we talk about it. Douglas Basin starts on the other side of the border, but for the purposes of what we can do anything about it, it starts at the Mexico border, the border of the United States and Mexico, comes north through Douglas, parts of Bisbee, one part of Bisbee is in the Douglas Basin, and then it goes up into McNeil, Elfrida, and all the way over to east and west of there. So that's where the Douglas Basin is, and we'll talk about the Douglas Basin a bit here tonight too. We're doing a presentation in Elfrida next week, so I know there'll be more people than the Douglas Basin there. So let's talk about where you get your water. How many of you get your water through a public utility, say Clear Spring, or Dragoon has its own private water company, or what, Elfrida Water? Okay, raise your hands a little higher. So maybe about an eighth of the group, maybe. Okay. How many of you have private wells? You might be sharing. Okay, that's I'd say about 80%. Okay, I'll raise my hand. That's what I call. Anybody here hauling water exclusively? 1, 2. Any others? 3. Any of you hauling water because your well's been dry? 1, 2. 3, okay. All right, we're going to talk about that too. You guys, he's right. And is there anybody here, brave souls, that are rainwater harvesting exclusively?
Not exclusively.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In addition.
There are, believe it or not, there are people in the valley who are using rainwater harvesting for all their water. Now, they don't do much, at least not depending on the level of their ground, of the rainwater harvesting. They may not be doing much with growing anything or that, or feeding water for animals and that, but at least for domestic uses, they can use that rainwater. Anybody here involved in agriculture here in the valley? Got 1, 2, 3, at least 3. That's great. We really want to bring in the folks from the agriculture community into this discussion, because really, you're not going to solve this problem without their input and their cooperation. So, thank those who are here today. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Spencer. Mark is going to introduce himself and talk about our challenge.
I think Steve should finish the presentation. Thank you, Steve. I'm Mark Spencer, and I've lived here. I actually live right next door to Steve and Lucia. Been here since I bought my land in '98 down here. I was fleeing Pinell County and Maricopa, which was growing like crazy. That was a long time ago. So I've been a resident here for a while, 21 years or so. My trade, I'm an engineer, I'm an aerospace engineer. I only tell you this, not to brag, but I have 17 patents. I told David Gallen this last thing I had in my house a couple weeks ago. I said, David, I only show you this because I'm not a country bumpkin that doesn't understand what's going on. I can see it. The data is clear. It's undeniable. And we need to do something about it. And I've read the reports. Steve's read the reports. There's plenty of data out there. We're going to go over a little bit of that today. This first graph, let me say this. This first graph tells me one thing. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with the possible solutions or not, we're all in this together. Because our water table is green. It's going down. And it's going down pretty rapid. Matter of fact, we won an award. Did y'all know that? We did. We won an award. I should start out with a joke because I get nervous. Well, my wife's not here to make she hates my jokes. So, anyway. Uh-oh. Maybe I should tell a joke.
I think he just fell asleep.
We are now the fastest sinking valley in the entire state. And let me say this, anything that I present tonight, my job is just to educate you. To share with you what I've learned. My well went dry 8 years ago. When I moved in here, and I come from Maricopa, where I hauled water for 3 or 4 years. I got tired of it. I couldn't afford to pay a well driller. I bought a well drilling rig, 1945 deuce and a half 6x6 from Korea. And I learned how to run it, and I drilled my own well. I will never do it again. But anyway, we're the fastest sinking valley in the state, and that's not according to me, what is going on? You wanna start? Maybe fire up my computers in case we can. Okay, according to Arizona Department of Water Resources, we're gonna refer to them as ADWR. They are the people that are entrusted with measuring, they are engineers. As a matter of fact, they detest politics. I met with the previous director, and he shut the door with me and my wife, and he said, I'd like to tell you the truth, but don't repeat it. I'll lose my job. Because the politicians he's appointed, he's a political appointee. But his name was Tom, that's all I'll say, he's been replaced. But he said, you guys are in trouble. And without legislative action, it's not good. Anyway, this is it. The Wilcox Groundwater Basin has the highest land subsidence rate in Arizona due to groundwater pumping far exceeding the natural mountain front recharge. Ground levels will likely continue to decline, resulting in continued land subsidence. There's no external. For people who think that there's a river running underneath our aquifer, there is not a river running underneath our aquifer, okay? If you believe that, I'm open to the evidence, but you're going to have to bring evidence, because I've not seen that evidence. Anyway, down here, it is estimated that current groundwater production, that means pumping, exceeds recharge by a factor of 3 to 8 times. I think, Steve, I think it's probably about 4 to 5 times, realistically, but it's a pretty broad number. So, what does that matter? Why does that matter to me? Well, it matters to me because my well, that when I moved here, was only dropping 2 or 3 feet a year, went dropping 5 feet a year, and is now dropping probably 6.5 or more feet per year. I deepened my well from 400 feet to 600 feet, and we hit this dry layer of caliche or clay there, and the driller said, I said, what do we do? He said, well, you got water. And if you divide out how much water I have over the number of years, I thought it was going to last the rest of my life. Now I know it's not. I'm going to have to deepen again, most likely, which is really sad. So it matters because wells are going dry. How's your well doing? If your well isn't dry, have you measured your wells lately? And by the way, it's just because you're residential, agriculture is going to have, you know what kills me is small ag are going to be hurt the worst and first. It's the small family farmers that are being driven out. And many of them, in my opinion, are already gone because they see the writing on the wall. And they sold out because they know what's going to happen to the aquifer. Not everybody, but I don't like that personally because I think it's a way of life here. And I think that farming should continue. Depth to water dropping 5 to 10 feet per year, and this is at an increasing rate. It's not getting better, it's getting worse, okay? Earth fissures, anybody seen the earth fissures? Yeah, you know, they've taken out, Dragman Road and 191 twice in the last 5 years. Parker Ranch Road. Parker Ranch Road, oh man, that one is huge. And I've got photographs, I've got aerial photographs, I'm a pilot, and in fact, I took Peggy Judd around the valley. Peggy here? No? You should see, they're everywhere. They are everywhere. And if you fly over the mountains, you'll see there's concentric earth fissure rings radiating out from the mountains. And that's because the bedrock's not moving, but the ground is sinking, and when it sinks, it cracks the earth as it sinks away, okay? Subsidence is what causes the earth fissures, as the ground compacts. And by the way, subsidence is permanent. The degradation that this causes is compacting the alluvial fill in the valley. That's where our water is stored. When that alluvial fill compacts, when you remove too much water, it compacts, it never comes. Contrary to, anybody see Monty Python's Quest to the Holy Grail? Very small rocks do not float. Okay? So contrary to, remember The Witch? If you saw the movie, it's the most dumbest movie ever. Anyway, it's funny though, I love it. The ADWR study again estimates overdraw at 3 to 8 times. And it's not just ADWR. There was another study done by the U.S. Geological Survey that was published in 1969, let's say. Yeah, pretty much, you know, it was the beginning of the first ag boom in the valley, 1964 through the mid-70s. And the U.S. Geological Survey back then said about the same thing. But we'll talk about that later. I want to talk about some of the, you know, I've heard this. My state senator said this to me. He said, Mark, we're in a drought. It's just the drought. If we weren't in a drought, everything would be fine. Well, the problem with that belief is, personally, I don't believe it's supported. We are in a severe drought, no question about it, I'm not questioning that. But what is a severe drought? Well, severe drought, which started around 1997, and really when I moved here in 2000, oh my gosh, it rained so much, I could hardly build my house. My floors kept flooding out. I kept on having to deal with water. It was raining and raining. I think we got like 19 inches of water that year. But our historic average rainfall is about 13 inches per year in the valley and about 25 to 30 in the mountains. What is a severe drought? Severe drought, we're down about 15%. Okay? So if the drought ended tomorrow, would we increase our recharge by 15%? Probably not, because a lot of it goes to evaporation. Okay? But our overdraft's 800%. So to have rain solve our problems, we would have to have increased rainfall by 500%, so over 1,000%, somewhere in there, to have rainfall take care of the amount of water that we're extracting from our aquifer. Ending the drought isn't going to change anything. It will certainly help on the surface. We'll maybe see some of our cottonwoods come back and get more perch water and stuff like that. But some people say, and Peggy has said this to me many times, Mark, we pump more water in the 70s. Anybody, sir, I know you're an ag. Were you here in the 70s? Were you farming?
No, sir.
Okay. There was a lot of farming, and it was all flood irrigation. And this is indeed a true statement. We were pumping around 400,000 acre feet a year in the 70s. I don't know if this is true, but I heard the reason it's called Kansas Settlement was because it was full of corn. And I remember coming down here in 1987, looking at land, and it was full of corn. And I thought, man, I feel like I'm in Kansas. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it's something somebody told me. But we did pump more in the 70s. And if you look at this graph here, that area right there is the 1970s. And you can see, I can't use the laser pointer because it doesn't work on an LCD. But this started in about 1940, and you can see it was precipitously down. So it's true, we were pumping more in the 70s. But to say that that means it's okay today because we're not pumping as much, all that meant is if we would have continued on that trajectory, we'd be way worse off than we are right now.
And everybody could be raising their hands if your well had already gone dry 10 years ago.
Yeah, your wells would have been gone a decade or more ago. But there was a reprieve, and what happened was the oil embargo, energy prices. Did you know that pumping water, movement of water, is the #1 use of electricity in Arizona?
Yep.
Yeah, amazing. The Navapache power plant was built just to supply energy into the grid to run the pump motors for the Central Arizona plant. It's a lot of power. Anyway, it's expensive, and because of the cost of electricity and fuel in the 1970s, a lot of land went fallow. A lot of the farms went back belly up over there. We had a reprieve, and AWR says we dropped to about 115,000 acre feet from 408,000 acre feet to 115, and the water table actually started to come up. I'm not a hydrologist, but that tells me that our sustainable yield is about 110 to 115,000 acre feet a year. You know what we're pumping now? 250. So we're pumping 250,000 acre feet a year right now. So anyway, this is the trajectory. You can see it there. The problem is this is based on 2014 data, not based on 2018. Even though the report came out in 2018, it's based on 2014, and pumping's increased. So this line is probably at a minimum closer to the low average mean as the trajectory of where we're going. Anyway, we're in this together, whether you like it or not. We all in this valley get water from one place, and it's under our feet. There's no other way to get water here right now. So, problems at the surface. It's not just depth of water. Some of my legislators said, "Wow, you got 100 years of water." Okay, what about my kids and my grandkids? What am I going to do with my farm? What am I going to do with my house if there's no water? It's not just the depth of water; it's surface regulations and its effect on our property values. This is great. The fissure that takes out Dragoon Road every couple of years. That fissure is actually about 3 miles long, and it starts just at the southern edge of that big pecan orchard at Dragoon and Cochise Stronghold, and it goes through that field. By the way, that field used to be an it used to be a male airfield in the 30s for the air carriers that used to fly through here. Anyway, that fissure goes from there all the way to the power plant. It's been filled in to the north, but it keeps opening up there too. let me see. There you go, there's the fissure. What I like about this picture though, is that it also shows the subsidence. This fissure, the earth, you can see visibly, in a couple of years' time, the earth has sunk 18 inches. That entire pecan orchard to the east of Cochise Stronghold Road has sunk. Now, it's actually sunk about 9 feet since 1964, but in relative terms, in relative short terms, that whole orchard has sunk 18 inches from subsidence. Since 1969, that sign on the top of the pole there, that was the ground level of that telephone pole in 1969. 9 feet. This is all from water extraction, water table extraction, okay? Subsidence.
That's a rate of about well, I think over the 50 years, about 3 to 4 inches a year.
If you look around, and I've seen this before, because we go to Stanfield, Arizona, these things are about 5 feet in the air. But this is a well, and a well is a column, it doesn't come press, so it goes down and it sits there, and as the ground compacts, as you have subsidence, the concrete seal, of course, that's glued to the column, looks like it's in the air. It's not, the ground has sunk away from it. If you go to Gold Miners RV Resort right here, you look at their well, you'll see that their pad is up in the air. That's subsidence, okay? What's this mean to us? Does it cost us anything? Does it affect our way of life? I would propose to you, I don't care what your profession is, if you're retired, if you're agriculture, if you're a rancher, this will affect you, and it will affect you negatively, one way or another. Loss of affordable water. Our politicians again like to say, oh, you know, if water's at 1,000 feet, that's adequate. It's not adequate for me. It cost me $14,000 just to drill 200 feet, and that was 8 years ago, Lucia, right? Today it'd be twice that. So affordability of water. Without water in Arizona, your land, it's not worth much. Increased loss of smaller diversified family farms, and this really bothers me. I'm not going to get philosophical, but that really bothers me. One of my dearest friends is a small family farmer, and he sees this, and we talk all the time, and about ideas and what to do. It lowers property values, about 15% is what the studies show. If you have water issues in your neighborhood, your house will be about 15% at a minimum less valuable than someone in an area where there's good water. What happens when an earth fissure comes down your driveway? You have to report that. You can't hide it. You have to put it out there. You have to tell people. I think it's within a quarter mile of your home or something like that. There's an earth fissure. You have to divulge that. That's because you can't stop them. And if one comes, there was one. You went down 191 to Richland Road, take a left. The very first driveway had a fissure going right down towards the house. That property was just bought, and the house probably be bulldozed and there's trees going in, so it doesn't matter.
Is that Dragoon Road?
Dragoon Road.
Dragoon
Rich,
Road.
not right. On dry wells, of course, if you have a dry well, your property isn't worth much anymore. And it causes cautious buyers. People begin to hear about it. I don't know if you noticed, but there's still people moving here, but they're not making, there's not a lot of big investment being made. They're moving little houses, or they're moving in you know, manufactured trailers and stuff like that. People are afraid to invest. Here's where the controversy starts. What do? And that's what I want to hear from you guys in a couple minutes. The water district has been floated, and I think the water district is a good idea. It provides water to residential users in spite of falling levels. I say that, but at some point, the water district runs out of water too if we don't address the root cause. I think it's a great idea because it will help those with marginal wells or those who've already gone dry. I'm absolutely, not that it matters, but I'm not against the water district idea. It will not.
Excuse me, sir?
Yes, sir.
When you're talking about a water district, you're talking about what they're trying to do in Sunzona with the dairy?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes. The CWIS, what do they call it?
Can you explain that for those who don't know?
So the dairy had proposed to use some federal grants and borrow some money to create a large water district over in that part of the valley. That would be part here, would exempt already existing water districts and water companies. And then the water district, which by the way is a taxing district, has the power to tax your property and generate revenues necessary. I think a lot of good part was supposed to be paid for by grants and stuff though. But the upkeep and all that would be, it's just like a fire district or a school district. It's a taxing district.
Actually, can I correct you,
Yes,
sir?
yeah.
That was the original option, but then after exploring that, they realized that was not
Oh.
something they could do. So it was just going to be those who joined in, and their
Oh.
initial startup fee and then their monthly fees that would be doing that after the grants to get it off the ground.
Yes, so there's two ways to form it. You can annex an area, and if 50% of the people in that area say, yes, I wanna be in it, then you all get sucked into it. They decided against that, and what they chose was the other option, which was you had volunteered to be in it, and then it would be a non-contiguous district. So it's still a tax district though, and once it's formed, if you volunteered to be in it, your property is in it, and you pay the tax for the upkeep and the
No,
electric
it was
costs.
for the infrastructure, it was not, the tax was not,
Well, it's still,
was not
Right,
it's
legal.
still fees, yeah.
So
It's still
anyway.
fee, somebody pays for it.
Well, yes, but if you choose not to be in it, you're not paying. for it.
Right, yeah, you wouldn't have been forced into it, which makes it even better. But I'm just saying, it's an option and it's a good option. I'm not saying it's not a good option.
And the agriculture, like you, the agricultural wells, the big agricultural wells would not be.
It does not help them, it is not an agricultural, district, it's a residential water district, not an
Well, it doesn't
agricultural
tax
district.
them, they are not taxed,
No.
because they are not included, so you paying them.
Correct. It doesn't address the underlying issue, that's my only real big problem with it. It doesn't address surface degradations, because even if everybody still get water, if the water table is still dropping, you still have earth fissures and subsidence, okay? Still a good option. I think it's part of the solution. Irrigation non-expansion area, we've already got one of those down in Douglas. The problem I have with this, would help, yeah, it freezes current levels of irrigation. That's all it does, freezes the current levels. It does not provide any tools for reversing or getting back towards what we call safe yield, or that 20,000 acre feet per year, or whatever we as a community decide together is a reasonable amount of water to extract from all of our groundwater data, okay? Active management area is a third option. An AMA, you've heard about this, and you've heard a lot about this because it's gonna be on the ballot in November. There were enough signatures gathered, to get this on the ballot. It petitions the Department of Water Resources to declare an AMA on the area. It freezes irrigation pumping. It looks back at the last 5 years, and as long as a piece of land was irrigated over the last 5 years, then that land is grandfathered, and you can continue to use that amount of water. So it doesn't do anything to immediately harm anybody. It freezes it. It does stop new land from being brought into production. So,
Clarify that it's only irrigation wells.
only irrigation wells.
Yeah.
What they call non-exempt wells, wells that pump more than 35 gallons a minute and irrigate more than so many acres, okay? What is it, 10 acres. But it doesn't force anybody to do anything different than what they're doing today, okay? It involves ADWR and experts from the community, hopefully, that's up to the governor who he appoints, that's for sure. But they develop an area plan and then they implement that plan, but they work with the community. There's a public comment and all this stuff, you get to work with them. There's actually 5 of these already in Arizona, 5 AMAs. The difference between it and the INA that's most important is it does provide some tools to help lower the withdrawal of the water, okay? They're not real big tools, but it's possible. Okay. But we don't want government. I don't want government, I'm a small government guy. I might be one of the only conservatives in the room, I don't know, but I am. And I don't like government telling me what to do. The problem with status quo, I'm gonna say this, whether you want water law or you think, oh no, I'm free man, this is my water, it's under my ground, it's my water. Well, we do have water law. It's called the law of the jungle, survival of the fittest. Only those with the deepest pockets and the deepest wells will have water eventually in this valley. That's the water law that we have right now, whether you are a small government person or not. There's someone else controls your water, whether you like it or not. If you don't believe me, wait till your well goes dry and see if you have any recourse. You have no recourse. Under current regulation, you have no protected right to water under your land, the deepest draw lands, period. That's what we have, that is the status quo, okay? It's a race to the bottom. That's what we're in right now. And I think with that, that says it all. I'm gonna bring that back up, and that's kind of what we have to deal with as a community.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Everybody's depressed now. We can do it.
And I know Mark covered a lot of material. If there was something in there you weren't sure what it was, you know, like we were talking about INA, and we're throwing things out there. If we haven't explained it, well, that's what the discussion is about. Bring up those questions. We want to bring everybody's knowledge level up on this. So we're gonna have, the rest of the meeting is gonna be dedicated to you, sharing with us your hopes for the future, your water anxiety, your water stress, whatever you wanna call it. Tell us about your situation and what you're concerned about with the water, and where we're headed.
My concern is.
How you finish, just,
Oh,
you're first, yeah. I will, yeah. But let me set a few ground rules, because we want this to happen in a certain way. First of all, I'm gonna say, be respectful. And we're all neighbors in this room, and we're all in this together. You know, we're not here necessarily to argue, we're not here to, you know, have a long protracted debate, or to, make personal attacks on other folks if there's something they say you don't like. Let's keep it, let's try to listen and learn and come to some agreement on where we're at with all this. So again, focused on uniting, not dividing, solution-oriented, forward-looking. We're just gonna ask you, when you do ask a question, you're first, so set a good example. Please stand when speaking. Let's just make sure everybody can hear. We have a microphone. The cord only goes so far. If we need it, we'll use that. Otherwise, we'll repeat the question, but try to project. We've got a small enough room here, and small, I think we can hear. If you can, let us know. We'll repeat the question. And if you're gonna make, if you come to some conclusions, it's helpful for people to buy in and understand why you're coming to that conclusion. If you provide some of the sources or backdrop for why you come to that decision. We're really about trying to make sure we're well informed, and well informed means that we really, have really looked at the facts and then are kind of describing reality the way it really is, not some made-up version that's out there. And there is going to be a fair amount of misinformation on this issue. Some of it deliberate, and some of it just people just don't know. So let's try to sort through that here tonight as best we can, and do that in a very respectful way. Learn to use this thing. Oh, wrong slide. Okay, so with that, I'll keep those up there while we're discussing. So Kathy, you have the floor first. Stand up and ask your question.
It's for concern. I see the pecan orchard.
Yes, yeah, we're just done.
I see the, whatever other tree we have out here. Pecan.
Pistachios.
I see the dairies. I see ground being irrigated and all the, whatever they grow for these cows over here. Where are we going to, how is this going to affect this? Are they going to still keep digging and building and pulling water out of our resource? That concerns me a great deal. It's ridiculous.
So can I ask you a clarifying question? So are you saying, are you asking how can we slow that down, or how can we change that?
Yeah, is there any hope for change? Any hope to slow that down?
Anyone want to answer that?
Are we limited to legal options?
I would hope so. We can talk about the legal options. All right, so let's talk about the legal options. In the state of Arizona, we have a handout at the front. I don't know how many of you got it, the one-page handout. I see Timothy, can I? So on the sheet, we kind of lay out the basics. I mean, Mark gave a lot of details, in fact. We lay out the basics. We say, okay, here's the underlying what's happening on top. Down the bottom, here's underlying what are limitations of what we can do. The first thing we say on here is all authority to regulate groundwater resides at the state level. Cochise County Board of Supervisors has no authority over groundwater regulation. Okay. So, Peggy can't do anything about it. She's our supervisor for this year, and English, and the Douglas Basin, she can't do anything about it. They can have some influence, no question, but they legally, they cannot come and say to people wanting to buy land here and put more, deep wells in and grow pecans or anything for that matter, you can't say no. In Arizona, there's nothing that can stop right now with that. It happens at the Arizona governor and state legislature are the only ones that have the authority. In 1980, our legislature, the governor signed into law the Groundwater Management Act, which was at the time kind of lauded as a model for groundwater management in the country. And that gave some authority of the state to regulate groundwater for the first time. Unfortunately, and I'm not going to mince words here, I'm being totally honest, there was a lot of lobbying that went on. There's a lot of people in rural areas that didn't want any regulation. This was in 1980. There were a lot of agricultural interests that didn't want any regulation in a lot of areas. I'm just brutally honest. They needed the votes to get this passed, because without this act, the Central Arizona project wasn't gonna happen. And we know how powerful all the businesses and everything in Phoenix and Tucson can be in terms of pushing something through. So they wanted the CAP water. The federal government told them, you can't have the CAP water without groundwater regulation, because we're gonna the whole country's gonna subsidize your habits of not living within your means in the desert when it comes to water. So the federal government, I think, actually was doing a good thing for us here. We're trying to. But, so we put this law into place. So that's our only vehicle right now for doing anything about this at this time. Would we like to see something better than the active management area? Yes, of course. I mean, in an ideal world, we would have had legislation passed. We haven't changed this Groundwater Management Act in almost 42 years now. It has not been amended at all, except for some minor revisions. So our own, I'm just going to say it right now. We feel, us as a group and each individual, but we want you all to make up your mind. Our thoughts, and I'd like to hear from others on this as well. Our thoughts is the only solution now is to bring in an AMA. It's not the perfect solution, but it will stop. We'll stop waking up one morning and seeing them clear the mesquites right next door to you to put in another 80 acres of pistachios or another 120 acres of whatever. Okay, next question. Yes. Stand up.
The reading that I've done in the papers and stuff, and I did have a conversation with Paper Janet about it too, is that Gail Griffin seems to have an immense amount of power over our ability as a community to get anything even to the legislature, because if I read correctly, she's from Hereford and she blocks any legislature that's trying to get through her committee. Have you had any discussions with her? I mean, what's her take on all this? I mean, she must care, she lives here, right?
Well, let me say one thing and then I'll let Mark finish. Just quickly, and I'm going to repeat what someone told me. I called someone in Prescott to talk about their water situation here because they have a water group there. And I wanted to get some advice on what they've done. And she says, oh, you live in Gail Griffin's area. I said, yes, we do. I didn't say anything about it. And she said, he said, she is the #1 reason we have had no change in water law in the state in probably the last 15 years. The #1 reason. So we'll talk a little bit more about a few of the things she's done to show you the evidence of that, but Mark will talk about some first.
Just short, yeah, I've met with her 2 or 3 times, met with David Young 2 or 3 times. I've not met with the new guy, yet, but because not because of this, but because I work in aviation, I got to know them all quite well. And I won't say which of them, but one of them, 8 years ago, I stood in the parking lot in Tucson and said, you have got to adjudicate water. And this person said to me, you know what did he say? What Mark Twain had to say about that.
Whiskey's for fighting.
What Mark, yeah. He said, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting, and I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. And that's why it's taken a grassroots movement. And for me, hats off to the folks that are doing the AMA, because I don't know what else is on the table. It's not, like Steve said, it's not perfect. That being said, Mr. Gowan, I've been speaking with him a couple times a week. He is finally starting to listen. He's starting to see it. And what his issue is rights. He says, It's property rights. You can't tell people what to do with the water or the land. I said, David, property rights have never been absolute in America. They never have been. You've always heard the saying, you got free speech, right? But you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. And yes, you have property rights. But when your rights deprive your neighbor of their rights, that is one of, in a conservative mind like mine, that's one of the only legitimate places for governance, is to stop that sort of behavior. Yes, you have right to water under your land, as long as you don't affect the water under my land. Thank you. That's, now, you gotta balance that somehow, it's not that simple. And that's why they haven't, how do you,
Does that answer your question?
It just seems like even if we get the AMA on the ballot, she'll probably block any further progress.
She really can't, the law is already, well,
we could amend the law.
they could amend the law. I think in the environment right now, she would not have the votes to weaken the AMA law. There's too much going on with water across the whole state. I mean, we're gonna have, Phoenix and Tucson are gonna lose 30% of the water likely, which is in 2023. 30% of their water going away. Today they got it, tomorrow they don't.
Good reason to start writing. Lupe?
Yeah.
Okay. Senator Gowan and Representative Griffin. Start writing them, start communicating. We vote for them.
Yeah, I have, but I never get a response.
Yeah,
And I never
she's-
see her responding formally anywhere, and I don't know if I just don't see
No,
it.
you're
but
not alone.
Has she ever voiced
You're
her opinions or anything?
Yeah. No, that's fine, no, she clearly is against water reform, but, and she'll say that, I mean, she'll say that.
You didn't say why
Government reform.
Phoenix and Tucson are losing their water, is it because the Colorado River's gonna?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's because it'll trigger the next level of cuts, because the drought is just worse. this
The
year.
whole state, the
Snow
whole state.
pack-
River, and they're not gonna get their water.
Yeah,
Okay.
the water level's gonna go up a little bit in the spring now, in the early summer, then they're gonna come down, and they fully anticipate in early 2023, before the snow melts in we're gonna be at a level where potentially they're not going to be able to generate electricity and potentially not even release water. I just read an article, yesterday, in fact, there's a newspaper article there, who brought it in, Todd did, right? Todd brought it in from the Wall Street Journal talking about it. It's all, they're hearing about this all over the country. I mean, this is in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, I mean, all these papers. This is big news. This affects millions of people. And California is one of the biggest users of Colorado River water, and they're gonna be hurt too. There we go.
I'm by the window. By the
Yeah,
window.
you're next, and then,
So listening to this, my family's been in the valley since the 70s. I was born and raised out here. I've seen it change so much. I've watched my well. I'm lucky I'm up in the stronghold. We have our own water source. We're not here, but I've seen people's wells go dry at 600 feet off of stronghold. And there really hasn't been any change. And it doesn't appear that there's going to be any change.
you mean change in the,
Legislation.
Yeah.
In any way to control this. I'm not against anyone that is farming in this community, that is putting money into this community, but we have farms coming out of state, California, and their money's leaving our, they're taking all of our resources and taking them out of our region, which is taking away from our schooling, which is taking away from the livelihood of everybody and the future generations that are gonna live here. Children, I know a lot of people that are questioning having children in this community because they don't know if they're gonna be able to have a sustainable life here. So with that said, it sounds like the legislature is the only way to go about changing this. It sounds like we have a block in the legislature that's stopping us from changing. So who's gonna run against that person?
that's a good question. And
That's the only way to change it.
That's the only way. Until we get serious about that, when they find out that we're gonna run somebody against them, they're gonna get serious real quick.
Oh, they will, they will,
Guaranteed.
and they have a lot of money, but that doesn't change it. People with a lot of money doesn't give them more right to the water under the ground than you. If your well goes dry, your life is over.
Right.
This is the community of people, not corporations. I have no problem with people running great businesses in this area and putting back into our community. We're taking money from here, taking our water and sending it back to California so they can live in their third house. Isn't okay. It's not okay. And we together have to do something about that.
And let me just add
Say amen.
that I think that's exactly correct. That some of you, and I feel too old, quite frankly, otherwise I'd stand up against somebody, because I think we do need to challenge Republican and Democrat. We need to challenge state legislatures, county board of supervisors, and even mayors of cities. And you know what? I've been watching Amazon workers. We can get, you know, if we're together in this, we could actually, like, go to the county board of supervisors, all of us, or we could, you know, I mean, it used to be in the anti-war movement, excuse me, I'm a little old, but, you know, we get out in the streets, and, maybe we help stop the Vietnam War, I don't know, but that's another subject. But we need, I'm totally 100%.
The only thing I wanna add to that is, we're not gonna do this divided. Bipartisan BS that's happening doesn't get anything done. Conservative, libertarian, green, Democrat, Republican, whatever you are, we're all human, we all need water to drink, we need water to raise our animals, to keep our horses going, we need water to have our kids get baths. We need water to live. Water is life. It's not just in this state, but this is where the water was. My mom told me that when I was a baby. The water wars are gonna start here. And we need to do something about that together, not divided. I don't care who you are. I mean, I do, you guys are awesome. But we have to do that together in unity, or else we're not gonna make it anything.
I mean, I understand, but, okay, we had a hand here, and then we'll come over here.
Thank you, Jay. This is just in response to something that you had said, and to piggyback on what this gentleman just said. Gail Griffin chairs the House
Natural Resources
Natural Resources Committee, so nothing dealing with water will get passed or even go to committee without her approving that. And that is the biggest problem. Gail Griffin is the #1 reason no water legislation ever gets to the legislature to vote on. And secondly, the County Board of Supervisors in 2013, 2014, I can't remember which year, they changed the law in Cochise County, and you had a limit of 7,500 cattle in one company feed lot, I don't know. So unlimited, which is why we're gonna do say now, because that's when they moved in, as soon as our County Board of Supervisors changed it from 7,500 to unlimited. So yes, the people that are in office are affecting this greatly, and they need to be.
Kind of.
I just mean legal. Come on.
Okay. Keep it respectful. All right, Trish is next, and then gentleman in the back.
So I know that we're like on the forefront, and it's a little embarrassing to be in all the newspapers all across, especially when you're talking to people from other states, and I'm like, it's like, okay, great. However, y'all need to know that we are not the only state that has water problems, and there are a lot of other states that are going to look to us and how we handle this for when they get their own water problems. Like Texas won't talk about it. Texas has got big water problems, and they're all like, la, 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 we're fine.
And you
So
lived in
they're gonna-
Texas for
yeah.
quite a few years.
And it's like, and the old timers there were just as worried about how much water was decreasing. And they have a lot of groundwater, but the rivers and their, you know, it's like their artesian well. I mean, it's like, it's good water. All their water levels are going down. Okay, so we're not the only ones. We may be the first, but we're not the only ones. So if we can get together and think and problem solve together, we could do something really amazing for all the other states that are gonna have to deal with this.
There's, I'll just make a comment. There is, one difference here, in this valley, and also San Simon Valley. that we have no surface water.
Right.
I mean, Turkey Creek runs part of the year, only water we get is the snow melt coming out of the mountain, for the most part, and occasionally after a really heavy storm. But we have no regularly running streams, or even significantly what I call intermittent streams that run, quite a few times a year. So that makes us different than a lot of places, but a lot of Texas don't either have that, but that puts us in deep doo-doo here when we run out of water. We have no other water.
We are the only state in the Colorado River Basin without groundwater regulation.
Yes.
We're the last state.
Yeah, we've had friends come out and visit us and they say, this is Arizona, you have no groundwater regulation here? She says, I come from a state that gets a guy from Michigan came to visit me. He said, I come from a state that gets 45 inches of rain a year. We have all kinds of regulation on our groundwater. And it's good because it's a more populated state, they needed that. You guys get 13 inches.
One other thing too, that I think is really important for us to know, like, we used to live in Colorado, and in Colorado, you are not allowed to catch your water. No rainwater, you are not, that is state mandated, when it falls from the sky, it is the state's water, it is not yours. So it's really important that we understand that we have a tremendous opportunity here to start catching water, and we better start doing it before it gets legislated out from under us. And I don't know if there are state funds or there are federal funds, but I would love to see something happen that helps people get gutters and rainwater catchment. There's no reason we can't start it.
Exactly.
All right, gentlemen, I'm back with
Well, you actually hit on a couple of things, but this stuff is going on quite a bit all over, actually. The primary water table in Colorado is sinking, and they've landed on the massive feedlots, the largest feedlots in the country, are in the middle of this thing, and they're, we just watched a documentary last week, and I couldn't tell you the name of it now. But,
Really?
they gave us the, it could have been Zeitgeist, because I didn't watch it this week. But they gave us statistics that were very interesting about how much water it takes to produce a cow compared to the plants that we would be eating. But, and like I said, she hit on quite a bit of it. The thing that I see is that there's a lot of, this is a small group of people relatively in the world, and then there's another one down the road. And can we unify all these? I mean, I think that's what you're doing. Trying to away from the door.
Absolutely.
That seems to be really important, really bring a lot of people, and it's people that have front doors on their house, not big.
Right.
It's one at a time, each.
Yeah, put it over here. Yes, sir.
We're retired from the state of Arizona, and now they handle the budget, and probably the most anti-government person here because of it. But without the AMA, we're down the water. We're gonna get some of these piece we should do. Arizona ran out of water in the 40s, that's why the CAP was started in the 50s, finished in the 80s. But if you don't get somebody with some teeth, you're dead.
Yeah, and just to clarify, around the AMA will put a freeze on any new irrigation. It's and it puts in place a process, a management plan and goal that can start to ratchet back the amount of irrigation, but it's a slow process. And the law, quite frankly, needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be strengthened in ways that provide fair and equitable ways to reduce our dependence on groundwater and compensate people that are giving up their groundwater rights in fair ways and that kind of thing. We've gotten to a point where we can't stay here, we have to bring it back down. But thank you for your comment. Over here. Mark.
I've been in this valley for about 30 years. And we came from Tucson and brought our girls here and wanted to have that life, out in the country. And we drilled a well and we're told we had 100 years of water. So this is a pretty emotional issue for me because I think about it from my children's standpoint, two of them live here in Sunsites. And between the two of them, I have four grandchildren. So I want there to be water for them. I want for them to be able to do what they need to do to live in this county if they choose to. And I don't want that right to be taken away. I have dear friends that have lost farms, and it's heartbreaking watching it happen. It really is. But I also wanted to say that something else has changed out here. This last year, I've had the worst allergies I've ever had in my life. It didn't used to be that way when I came here. With all of the clearing and the dust, and yes, we have wind, and yes, we have drought, we have so much more clearing. And it's dusty all the time now, and I don't know if you guys look out, but I live at the base of the Chiricahuas, up 181, Mount 48. And from here, when I do yoga in this room, and I look that way, sometimes I can't see that mountain very well. And I've had sinus infections, and it's just horrible for this past year. So I'm really on board with getting something done. I want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, I'm Sonia Gasho. I ranch in this town and up to the on the forest. So yes, I raise cows. But
We need you.
what I wanted to say was, I totally agree with your printed goals on your little stand here. I agree that we need to work together. I agree that there are concerns. I've had to re-drill my own well, okay? So please understand, I think that there are concerns and we do need to work together on them. My concern is that an active management area is not gonna get that done because it is not locally controlled. Yes, there's a groundwater users advisory council, but they have no decision-making authority. Once you have an active management area in place, it cannot be revoked unless we change the current water law. You don't know what the goal is until after it's voted for, and then the Director of Water Resources makes that goal. He has to do that within 30 days of that passage. I don't know about you, but I think that's not gonna happen with a coordinated stakeholder group and public meetings that are representative of every interest in this valley. And them being centered in Phoenix, where our government is, understandably, I don't think they're gonna get that done in 30 days with a well thought out goal. I would love to see, again, yes, it's been tried in the past, sometimes it's just not the right time, right? I would love to see us come together, as I said, with a stakeholder group that represents all of the water users in the valley, the power plant, the mines, agriculture, homeowners, everyone represented on that group, and come together to come up with a solution that will work for all of us. And that might lead to some further legislative action. But if all of us are represented and we've all gone through that process, then it would be that much stronger to pass at the legislative level. I will tell you, Gail has tried to bring some water law. Just this past legislative session, she had a temporary INA bill, which I personally thought was a great idea because it would limit water use but give you time to form that kind of a group and work together. She pulled that bill because of other folks adding on riders and changing the basic ideas of that bill. Unfortunate, right? I thought it was a great first step. The rural management area that Regina Cobb has proposed, again, it's not that it's a bad idea, it's that it needs some real work on how it's regulated and run. And I know from what your comments have been that you all want that local control. And AMA is not the way to get that right now, as it stands in Arizona law. So I would just really advocate for a stakeholder group that comes together and that considers all of our water users in the valley and recognizes that agriculture, however you want to define it, is 64% of our county's revenue. If that goes away completely, or you enact an AMA and the only people left are the bigger players, then now you're looking at who's gonna fund your hospitals, who's gonna fund the schools, the fire departments, all of those things that we depend on, especially Sunsites as an older community. So this is such a complex issue, and there's so many things to consider, including soil profiles and drought and all of those things. I am not arguing that there's a problem, okay? That there isn't a problem, please hear me say that. But I really think that we need to slow down and come together as a group, this Cochise Groundwater Stewards might be the right people to kind of get that moving and then go from there. Because if you put an AMA in place, once it's enacted, it's forever. You can't, there is no way to get rid of it or amend it at this point in time.
Let me, yeah, so, are you Sonia?
Yes, I am.
Sonia, thank you, and, well taken. This is a big deal. We don't want a knee-jerk reaction.
Exactly.
No doubt about it. There's a man standing in the room right now, I'm not gonna point him out, but did just this thing, helped to work the community together. And he came up with a solution and offer, you know who I'm talking about. And thank you for doing that. And Gail Griffin, sandbag.
Yes, as I said, it's not always the right time, even though we might want it to.
And I think you're right, and the time is, you know, I was talking to somebody outside a little bit ago, and I think we've reached critical mass. I think the community is really coming together on this. There's been enough people suffer with dry wells and such that it's hitting home. The problem is, well, there's a couple things about the AMA I want to mention. The AMA is run by the Arizona Department of Water Resources. The director runs it. The governor appoints 5 people, and there's nothing to say, and by golly, we better lobby that we get those 5 people chosen from amongst us.
Yeah,
because they can be.
It's not a requirement
It's
though,
not a
and that's
requirement.
scary,
It's
because
not
they
a
could all be
requirement. I
from
agree.
Phoenix.
I agree, but we can see that happen. We can make that happen. We can make it so that it is a local. We need the expertise of ADWR, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that having all the control in this valley is gonna be helpful. Or, I think we need somebody from the outside possibly coming and saying, oh, all right, kids, settle down, you know what I'm saying? Now, I don't like government, I said that earlier, I don't want government control over me. But right now, what I've got controlling my water table, quite frankly, is stockholders. And I don't fault them for that. I'm, like it or not, I don't believe in a lot of the capitalism going on today, but I'm a capitalist, I own my own business. I think America's great. Okay, but when all that matters is the return on investment of stockholders, we can't let our water be regulated by that. Our water needs, that's why I personally would rather have it be regulated. Is it the best of all worlds? No. By the government? But at least I get to vote for them. I do not, if I don't participate as a shareholder, I don't have a say. You see what I'm saying?
I
So
do see what you're
it
saying,
is a
that's why
lesser-
I said we need.
Yeah, it's definitely a lesser of 2 evils.
I don't think we have to pick that way. I don't vote that way on voting day,
I
so.
have a question about that, because there are AMAs, I have 2 statements, but there are AMAs in Arizona. And have they been more successful in controlling water in Tucson and Phoenix? I know they're urban, have they been successful?
All they've done has been arrest the increase, which is all we're saying this would do. All we're saying is the options here.
Here's what, no, Alice, let me answer your question.
To some extent, they've been successful. Is that-
Here's I'll just give you a number, and you guys urban use of water is down 40% from what it was when the AMA went in place. And, like it or not, we have about 5 million more people in the state in those urban areas than there was in 1980. You tell me, is that a success or not? That's the urban use. Agricultural use has not been that successful in my estimation. You can go and look on the record, you can look and see on the Arizona Department of Water Resources, their reports where even the Arizona Department of Water Resources director has said that the AMAs have not been as effective with some of the agriculture reduction that they were hoping they would get, particularly in Maricopa County, because what they were banking on was because of the population growth. If you take a 120-acre field, or 160 acres, let's say, that's being irrigated for alfalfa and wheat, say 2 crops a year, you can reduce the water use by about a tenth by building all homes on it. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing to build all homes on it, but that was what the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and quite frankly, most of our politicians were betting on this growth to reduce the amount of agriculture in these areas, and that reducing our water. That hasn't happened to the extent that we'd like. It's or they would like us, that they thought it would, but it has happened to some extent. But again, water use for urban uses is down 40% for, overall from where it was back then. We're much more efficient at using water in urban areas, and we're recharging and doing a lot of those things.
You got your facts a little mixed up, sir. You can't, alfalfa's on a 4 or 5 year rotation. You don't plant wheat behind it.
Well,
Yeah, corn, it would be corn followed by wheat. Right, corn. Right, I agree.
You plant wheat because you get the nitrogen from the green of the alfalfa.
Yeah.
Now, since I have the floor, I've been listening to all you people. I haven't heard a thing here that solves our water problem. You can do this, you can do that. I may not be right, but I think this is a right to work state, correct? This is a right to farm and ranch state, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's definitely a right to work states.
So, I come in here and I wanna drill a well, I'm gonna drill a well. You people ain't gonna stop me. This little group ain't gonna stop me. Now, there's a very simple solution, and I'm glad these people start talking about these other states going without water. The White House especially, they don't need water. But it's gonna come to think out of the box. Desalt the ocean. It'd be so simple to go down through Mexico and bring pipelines.
There you go. You're right.
And California, they did that for years, but no, you can't do that out there.
They just stopped that not too long ago too.
But anyway, that's the only solution you got. You're not gonna fix your water problem by eliminating somebody from pumping water. And I'm not gonna drill everybody a well here. So, there you are.
And you grow alfalfa or corn or wheat or?
No, I used to be in the cattle business, and they broke me in 14.
Just a question for you, because I know what I've read, again, no one here in Arizona is getting desalinated water from Mexico yet. I mean, that's where you're talking, we're talking at least 10 years down the road.
Might not be that far.
We're talking billions of dollars, and what I heard, the estimate today, in today's dollars, we would be spending $10,000 an acre foot. Could a rancher pay $10,000?
It's gonna have to come through the government. They send that money to all these other foreign countries that don't like us at all. What's up over here?
Christian, yes.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to just share a little bit of perspective on the AMA and what we can do in coming together to vote on things and find solutions. And there's two important points. One is that in regards to what's called a subsequent AMA, and this will be the very first one that's subsequent, voted in or declared by the director. And that's when the AMA director, who's appointed by the AWR director, puts together a plan for that AMA. There is legislation that allows you to challenge his plan. You take it to a judge and say, this isn't gonna meet our needs, whether they're from this person or that person, for these reasons, and then that judge can see it, uphold it or deny it. So there is some power to challenge whatever the shape of the AMA ends up being, which is really important to know, and we should probably get ready to do that, because I know someone's not gonna be happy with what he decides. But then the other thing is that, right now, yeah, there's no way to undo an AMA. But just as we could come together to try to create some new legislation, we could come together to make it possible to reverse that AMA. If we can do one thing, we can do the other. If we're talking about leveraging our political power as a group. And what I see is that there's no other way to slow down water usage right now except for the AMA. So I say, let's push that button. Let's keep coming together as a group to figure out the very best solution that meets the most needs of the most people, and then work to get that in place.
I want to give my humble advice. I think you people with a well that is bad performing, sign up for the water district. Because an INA or an AMA not gonna solve the problem. It's gonna be a heuristic fight to the end. And it's gonna be not stopping the pumping. It stopped the increase of pumping, I agree with that. But for the moment, a dry well now is in 20 years with an AMA or an INA still a dry well, I'm afraid. Sign up for the water district, at least for the short term, you got water. And maybe hold on to your property value.
The water district is a very small area and
Stand up if you want.
Oh, wait, you can hear. I don't want to talk.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
I thought that it would.
Speak up,
So, I can't hear you.
Give her the mic. Give her the mic and speak up. Can't hear
Anybody remember Wolf from Riverview?
Hold the mic closer to your mouth.
Anybody remember Wolf from Riverview, who was working with creating the water district, the grants, the wells?
Yeah.
Okay, he gave me a map and he showed me the water district. And it came to the corner of my property, going down Cross Creek. It goes down Night Owl. Everybody to the north of Night Owl gets excluded. I got excluded. Everybody that was on the west and the south in that little box and down through Sunny Zona got included, and that's it. That's all they were trying to do. And then they had this ridiculous idea of piping to homes like it was in a city. The only way a water district would work is if you had a central well or several central wells every so many distances apart and adequate depths and funding, and then you had trucking. Because you run out of water, you're going to need to haul water. Don't forget, everybody digging their own well is the most ridiculous thing in the world because of the millions of dollars it actually costs. And then you're constantly replacing it. But if you did have water hauling, you know, if you're doing a farm, that's something different. I'm talking about just living on my property with a few horses and cows and chickens and whatnot. Yeah, that you can afford to fund. You can't afford to fund what was proposed by Water here. That water district was just a really bad idea. And the thing of it is that, you know, whether you got into it, you mentioned that, you were forced to, everybody in that district was going to be forced taxed.
Well, they changed that. They did
What-
change.
Yeah, well, even if they didn't change it, then how many people do we have out here to support a water district if everybody doesn't contribute? I mean, where's the contribution for a fire department come from? Comes from taxes. You buy insurance. You pay the fire department insurance. And if you set a fire going up and down the road, like one of our great neighbors did, you know, he may be paying a little bit more. What can I say? You know, we need something, but I think we need to think outside the box. Oh, here's a mic.
Thank you.
I think I could be pretty loud enough, but, we definitely need to get on to action and making sure that we can do something in our valley and work on that now, but, all of this water issue really does also stem from a much larger, it's the symptom of a much larger problem, which comes out to be our industrialized food system, which is really made to make food with the lowest amount of profit. Right now, we have CAFOs, combined animal feeding operations, where these cows are eating tons of soy and corn. Those, each one of those pounds of beef can take up to 18,000 gallons of water to make. So our money can be used to vote with our dollar, and you can take some of the money that you're gonna buy on cheaper meat and start focusing on buying meat from your neighbors who are ranging their cattle, feeding them grass, and focusing on more sustainable practices. And if you can take one of your dinner meals a night and replace beef with mushrooms, which we have locally grown in the area, you can reduce your water usage by 1,000% on that one meal. So really looking at what products you're buying. Sunland farms, most of these big farms are very large farms that are getting sold to companies not direct to consumer, but looking at what products you're buying and making sure that they come from companies who are focused on low water practices, sustainable soil sustainability. That does take some researching, some time, and some thinking about the decisions that you're going to make with your food. But by making those decisions, we're going to start curing the water problems that are happening all throughout California, Colorado, and the Midwest, of trying to draw as much water as fast as possible to grow as much food for as cheap as possible.
Can you explain a couple things? I'm really new to this area, forgive me, don't hate me. And I'm from
Welcome.
Cochise. And I lived there 33 years, and I use my share of water, because I got a pool. How does this affect me that I'm on the city water? I know you're all on, most of you are on the wells, but how do we get people who are on, it's not city, I know, but whatever.
Clear Springs.
Yeah. How do we get them to care? Because it's gonna affect them anyway. Which one, how do these affect us? These three things, because we're paying water to them, prices are gonna go up, but how did, you didn't really explain how that might affect those people on the pipes. That's the best way to put it.
So there are a number of private water companies in the Sulphur Springs Valley. Clear Spring in the Sunsites area has, the village of Sunsites, and then also a few other spots further to the west. Then Dragoon has a private water company. Frida has a water district. So there are a number, and then of course Wilcox has your municipal city water. I'm not aware of any other large public water utilities in the area. They let me put the problem in perspective. When you look at what's happening here in the valley, we're in the Wilcox Basin. We're taking out about 250,000 acre-feet of water a year out of the ground right now. And I say we because all of us contribute to that. But when you look at the percentages, you and I, all of us in this room that are using domestic water for our domestic uses, all domestic uses, including the city of Wilcox, all these private water, all the private well users in the room, and everybody else outside the room that uses private water, we account for about 1.3% of all the water coming out of the ground. So right now, that's about 6,000 acre-feet. Okay, we're pumping out 250,000. So the other one, there's another 1.5% is the power company. Apache Generating Station uses about the same amount, a little bit more than all the domestic well users here and all the utilities. 97% of all the water is being used by agriculture. So this is really an agricultural problem. That's why we have to have agriculture at the table. And this is not about putting agriculture out of business. I want to make that clear. I know you made it sound like that's what this is not at all what we're trying to do. I personally, I'm an optimist, but I personally think we have opportunity here. I forget who mentioned it. Maybe it's true. Be a leader in the country. Let's figure out how to do sustainable agriculture. Agriculture in this area with sustainable water use. Because if we don't solve this problem, our kids are going to have to solve it, or our grandkids, or their kids. It's eventually there's not going to be any more water underneath here. There's very little water coming in. So the bottom line is, yes, all the utilities will be impacted, or I'm sorry, I believe the city of Wilcox is, because they're a municipal, let me back up. The AMA does have a section that looks at municipal use and tries to cut back. That's the whole reason Phoenix and Tucson cut back their water, particularly Phoenix, cut back their water use 40%, like I talked about. Because part of what they were given a gallons per capita limit, as a goal. And so they started incentivizing homeowners to put in water efficient appliances, all these other things, drip irrigation, all that kind of stuff. Smart landscape. 80% of the domestic water that's used in municipal areas is landscape. What you need, you can live off of rainwater harvesting if all you want to do is domestic water. Here, you could actually live on 13 inches of water. You have to have a good system, but it'll work. Bottom line is, yes, we all should be contributing by putting in those water efficient appliances, by being judicious with our outdoor landscaping and all that. But yeah, it's not gonna, what we do is not gonna solve the problem, unfortunately. Did that answer your question?
I just wondered how those three things affect people who are getting municipal water. If you pick one or the other, do they even regulate it? You're saying they do. They regulate in Phoenix, so they regulate the water for even the municipal pipes, not just water.
They create conservation goals.
What it will do is it frees the current level, which means that the increase in drought and the depth that your water company's gonna have to drill, they're gonna have to re-drill, which will assess to you the cost of that deeper well. So that's really the biggest change. We don't know until they do the plan what kind of incentives they might do to the municipality. So.
And the bottom line is, if we do nothing and we stay on the course run, it's not gonna matter because we're all gonna run out of water. Gentleman in the back with the hat.
So many issues to deal with. I don't really know where to start. Mark said somebody was in the room that was working on the modified INA. There were 15 or 18 of us that worked on that back in 15, and we actually got legislation ready to go to, we got a bill ready to go to the legislature that we couldn't find anybody to open a folder to go forward with it. So it died for lack of interest. But we did bring a bunch of people together. I mean, we had some homeowners there, we had growers, we had farmers, APCO was there. We had a lot of people at the table, and by the time we got done putting everything together, everybody was mad at us. So we thought, well, we're probably about where we need to be. But there, so we got the first base. We got, at least there was some interest in it. The issue with an AMA and why it's worked in the valley is because they have CAP. I mean, that's a huge deal, because without CAP, that they're recharging groundwater and that, that's the way it works in that area. Now, true, we're in a drought. Lake Mead is down to 1071, Mark, I don't know what it is. When it gets below 1075, agriculture takes the first hit, okay? And it takes a huge hit. And by 23, as you mentioned earlier, they're gonna be farming maybe half of what they're farming. I'm not even sure that's gonna be realistic. So the way an AMA works, the way that it's set up, there's three directions you can go. One is safe yield. Okay, safe yield would take this valley right now from, and I'm gonna guess a little bit, of 70,000 acres that we're farming in the Sulphur Spring Valley. That would take us down to about 15,000 acres. Okay, which that would be with safe yield is what is recharged every year. You mentioned there's 250,000. Last numbers I heard was 200, 225, but we can argue about that all day long. We're overdrafting somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 to 200,000 acre feet. Okay, that's just the reality. So safe yield is not gonna work for the agriculture community, okay? Because we're gonna be down to about 15,000 acres, which means you lose, Safeway doesn't need to be near as big as it is in town. The hospital doesn't have any funding. The school is cut back next to nothing, although you may not need as large a school, because all the people that agriculture, both the farming and ranching, but obviously farming we're talking about, we use most of the water. I'm a farmer. I'm also a crop advisor. We use the lion's share of the water, there's no doubt. But y'all are all part of that. You mentioned the cattle, okay? You guys all eat steak, or you all eat something. You all drink milk. We're all part of the issue. And guess what? We all moved to the desert. Somebody told me a couple of weeks ago, it was a reporter out of Tucson. He said, a bunch of people want all the farming to go back to Mississippi or Arkansas where it rains a bunch. That's fine. But guess what? We can't grow lettuce back there in the winter. That's why people farm here, because y'all like it. Y'all like lettuce, you like all your greens. And I'm not trying to stir up anything. I'm just, you need to think about all these different issues. There's a lot of us in this community that will be gone. If that's what ADWR comes in, if we vote in the AMA and ADWR comes in and says, well, we're at safe yield, okay? The company I work for, and I farm part-time, but I work for a company, we're gonna lose 20 employees and all their kids. Fertizona, fertilizer company, they're gonna use about 20 employees and all their kids. Stokes is gonna lose all their employees. They've got about 18 right now. I just talked to them this morning. Cochise County farmers, all the funding that goes to the county for the land taxes and that, we're gonna lose all that. So somebody's gotta pick that up, or the hospital's gonna go away. The school's gonna shrink to nothing. Hardware stores, I mean, anything. But, so there's gonna be at least 100 people in Wilcox that work for directly companies that directly serve agriculture. So we're gonna go somewhere so we can survive. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just say, you're mentioning 1 of 3, and safe yield, as far as I know, has never been implemented in Arizona or anything. So what are the 2? It's never been done. So
right.
What are the other 2?
The other, one of them I can't remember. I'm having
so
brain.
Safe yield, no question. Safe yield would be bad for a lot of folks.
Well, it'd be bad for the valley. I mean, it'd be bad for everybody.
But that's not the only option.
That's not the only option. Another option is planned depletion. Okay, and one of them is under safe yield, although I can't tell you which one it is. Where there's Pima Canal, I don't remember. But one of them is planned depletion. Okay, what that is that at some, pardon me.
Maricopa and Pima, Tucson, Phoenix and Tucson are under safe yield. The Canal County's under planned depletion.
Okay, I mean, essentially what that does, and what a lot of people thought back when we were working on this modified INA, is that economics is going to take care of it. So the planned depletion is that over a period of time, if we're trying to pump water, I can't pump water from 1,000 feet. I just can't. Okay, can't afford it. You, on the other hand, if there's a water district, okay, if you have your own well, no, you can't pump from that depth. There's no way. But that's where I think everybody's short-sighted that wasn't interested. I live on a farm. I have this ground right here, right next to us, okay? I haven't been farming it. I have pivots up there to farm it, but the wells aren't hooked up. But I couldn't afford to pump water from 1,000 feet. You can't afford to pump from that depth. However, a water company, whatever depth they have to go to, is like, I met with the city, two folks on the city council. They can pump water from 3,000 or 4,000 feet if that's what they need to do. Because your bill's gonna go from, make up the number, $80 a month to $100 a month, $120 a month, whatever that is. But if you're on that water company, I'd sign up. I have a great domestic well here. I'd sign up for a water company in a heartbeat. Because I have a supply of water now that if I have to pull that well, it's gonna cost me $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, okay? If I have to drill another one, it's gonna be probably $30,000 or $35,000. So you'd be, well, and it may be, depends on how deep you have to go, okay? But you'd be foolish not to sign up for a water company, to have somebody else take care of it. I mean, that's my opinion. I'm not trying to argue with it. I just want everybody to think of all of these things that are going on. You talk about Riverview, or some of these other growers in the valley. They are, and I work with, and full disclosure, I work with Riverview. I don't work for them, but I advise for them, okay? But they're pumping about 30% less water, 35% less water on the ground that they were farming when they bought it, that was being farmed. So they are so much more efficient than the previous owners were. And, well, I mean, it's a good thing. They're trying, and they're spending, is it a huge operation? Absolutely. They're spending a tremendous amount of money trying to learn how to be more efficient. You talk about sustainability. We are, the valley as a whole, we probably work harder on cover crops, soil microbiology, that kind of thing. We work as hard or harder here than most places in the country. But everybody talks about sustainability and what all that does. When we grow a cover crop so that we can control the dust, and that, when we do those things, guess what? It takes water. So you have to realize everything we're doing, everything's a trade-off. We all drink milk, most of us probably. That, well, buy it from someplace else. They're doing the same. They're doing the same thing. Well, okay, so not in my backyard. So, but guess what? Everybody here probably moved here, and there were already farms in the country. Okay, I farmed right up here on the slope, and when that farm was broken out in 1959, there was nobody there. They moved. Everybody moved in, and everybody has every right to do that. They moved in. Guess what? I had to drill deeper. It wasn't me, it was a previous owner. So, I mean, just realize that there's so many factors. A whole bunch of us here are family farmers. And it's like you said, whether it's Riverview, whether it's the pecan guys and that, if you're invested in the stock market, you're invested in some of these outfits. So, right, wrong, or different, if you don't like that, I guess get out of the stock market. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way.
You want to wrap up on
yeah, no, go ahead. I mean, I could talk here for hours, but.
All right, just set it up and,
So, just to kind of piggyback what you're saying, and that is that I think it's time to start thinking even further outside the box. We've got Zach here, who's being very quiet, hasn't said anything, and he's a permaculture specialist. It's like, if y'all really want to decrease water, talk to him, for goodness sake. It's like he's got all kinds of ideas for how to naturally catch the water so that it holds and it doesn't run off. That would make a huge difference. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, y'all, it's like, think bigger yet. Ground cover? Yes. Think bigger yet. It's like, and Zach needs to do his own talk about all the possibilities, please. But seriously, there's like a lot of really, really good ideas that haven't come up. And it's like, if we're gonna bring everybody together, those bigger, better ideas need to come up, not just what everybody knows. Sorry.
I want to piggyback on what this woman was saying back here, and that I think in my heart, and we are only talking about this AMA as an option, or a water district as an option, and I would like to see us bring it back more locally into the sustainability realm as to what is being allowed to happen in this valley. And the Planning and Zoning Commission at the county level meets every month to approve applications for new businesses or expansion of businesses. If we organize ourselves, we talk about signing the AMA petition, we haven't talked about our pledge for a sustainable water policy in Cochise County. The pledge is where we sign, and we have a supermajority of people that put their name on the line, and we take their photograph, and we bring that as a voice to the county supervisors. And we say, we don't want this kind of development, we want this kind of development. We want to promote sustainable farming. We want our small agricultural businesses to stay alive. We don't want to see our water be depleted. We want it to be sustained. And when we talk about how we're going to do that, we're going to use people that are already doing it on a small scale in a productive way. So I think that the AMA is all well and good, but that is a state level decision. Our power is going to be in our county level, and when we present ourselves as a supermajority to our county supervisors, they're going to pay attention because we have elections coming up, and we can vote those people out, and we can get people in those positions that support the philosophies of how we want our valley to grow. So I think that we haven't talked about our pledge drive, and any of you in this room that haven't signed our pledge that says that I, Donna Pulling, support a sustainable water policy in Cochise County, the entire county. Take my photograph, and we bring 1,000, 2,000 of those signatures and those photographs to the county. They're going to pay attention. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna, Jessica and then Michael, I think we need to wrap it up because we're running a little over time. Oops. Okay, one over here. So three and that's it, okay? I'm sorry, we're running out of time. So, Jessica, go first, and then Michael, and then this gentleman over here.
So I know that listening to everything tonight has kind of brought something to my mind, that sustainability is going to be sacrificed, whatever route we choose. It's going to mean giving up something, like Coral brought up. Maybe it's, giving up one night of your steak, or going with something different, or replacement. If we go with the AMA, there's going to be sacrifice in this county from the farming side of it, like Alan had pointed out. And so I think that's something, a lot like what Donna was saying as well, kind of what we have to decide for ourselves. What are we willing to sacrifice? Whether it's running for office, like what James was saying, who's going to stand up for him? That's a sacrifice. I've been in positions where I'm on a governing board, and it's not fun. It's kind of a headache, but that was a sacrifice that who's going to stand up to make that sacrifice? That's one way. Are we going to pledge to, like the lady here in the front said, look at permaculture, talk to people locally, use our land to help support, groundwater sustainability. But it all comes down to, there's no simple solution, because sustainability is going to cost some sacrifice. Yep. And I know that there's a really unique group of people here, and we all want a solution. And I think ideally it's going to come down to, like, what is that going to look like? Because we can all make a difference, whether or not we have these big things like an AMA or a shareholder group, stakeholder group, that it's going to be individual sacrifices as well. So I just wanted to thank you for all your comments. It's just phenomenal hearing.
Okay, Michael, and then.
Like some of the rest of you, I live down the way in the Douglas Basin. I got 40 acres down there. I put out about 5 acres of it in fruit trees and a couple of little greenhouses. I'm not a commercial grower. I do sell a few apples at the farmer's market and stuff like that. I've been down there 50 years. I've been trying to do it the right way. I started out with a windmill, with a backup, a gas pump. I found out that solar pumping is the way to go, like most other people have. So I switched to that a few years ago. I just wanted to comment a couple of things going on here tonight in terms of these options. I think, from my point of view, there is no reason not to have an AMA and water district.
Yes.
Like those of you who live in the areas where your wells go dry, and mine's not fortunately yet, and I had a chance to get on water district, I'd grab it up like the man said. It would make a lot of sense to me.
But whether you got a water district or an AMA, it's gonna go dry eventually. We are in a changing climate situation. We're in a 20-year drought. If you look at the history of the Southwest, they're saying now that we've got the longest drought in 1,200 years is what's happening right now. Well, what was going on 1,200 years ago? If you study anthropology, and I read a lot of anthropology about the Native Americans in this part of the world, they left here.
Right.
Because there was no water. They went where the water was either running or flowing. We can't do that. Some of us can. Some of us get up and leave. I'm too old for that. I'm not going to explain. But whether or not you've got an AMA or a water district, eventually it's going to run dry because the climate is changing. So if we don't stop using the water, I mean, an AMA is not going to stop Riverview. It's not going to stop the big pecan growers. It just ain't going to happen. So we've got to do something. Both of those solutions are temporary solutions. And so we've got to do something. What's going to happen after the AMA, after the water district. Now, part of that, I want to go back to just the AMA part, because I've heard a couple of things that don't quite make sense to me about the AMA. The AMA, we're talking about it like it's a done deal, and we're going to vote on it, and it goes into place, and there it is. You know, we've got all these restrictions, blah, blah, blah. That's not what it is. There's going to be a public process that goes on probably for several years, as far as I can tell, where we as individuals in this county and our county supervisors, whoever they may be by then, are going to be in that process telling the ADWR what has to go into that AMA, into our AMA. We're not approving a Pinal or a Maricopa AMA. We're writing our own. Now that can be good or bad, because like somebody said, all of the stakeholders are going to be at that table. And in my experience with stakeholder situations is, the little guys lose. Okay? So that's a process you've got to have a lot of political force in if you're going to have a voice. And I'm not optimistic, but what the hell other choice do we have? That's the only things that are out there right now to take care of our immediate problems, our water districts and the AMA. I'd like to mention just one other option that has not come up here, and I know there's a lot of you folks here that are anti-government in a lot of different ways. I got my problems that way myself. But there is no federal groundwater law. The fact that we have a state groundwater law, as I think Steve mentioned, is unusual. It was a new kind of thing to have happening because the feds couldn't deal with it. Why? Because the same powers that be federally said no. We don't want your regulation on our well. We don't want you telling us how to use our water. Federal legislation didn't have it. We were lucky, I think, to get the AMAs, the Groundwater Protection Act that we got. It's not perfect, it's got problems, all laws have problems. All laws are made by compromise, nobody gets what they want all the way through. Mo Udall, a great legislator in my point of view, used to teach us that all the time. Like somebody else said, everybody was kind of unhappy at the end of the process, we must have been doing something right. That's the way the law is. But we've got to talk not only about getting supervisors who are really concerned, as Donna was saying, about this problem, and state legislators. My God, if we don't get rid of Dale Griffin, we're never going to get anything. Okay? We've got to do that. We've got to get legislators up there who will look at our problem and not say, we've got plenty of water, which is what Gail says. Somebody asked, what does Gail say about this? That's what Gail says. She says we got plenty of water. And we know that's nonsense. So we've got to change the way that people who run the show, who those people are, county level, state level, and I would say you better get back on the federal level and start talking about groundwater protection.
Okay, make it quick and then.
Okay. I took a lady a few years ago to a pistachio farm. He just bought it out from a foreign country. And I said, she wanted to buy pistachios. And she said, why don't you sell them here in Arizona? He said, because we sell them to China and Japan because they pay the price. okay? And they're taking our water.
Okay, last comment? You got the closing comment?
I'm super tired. I really want to get home.
Yes, it's been a long day.
It's amazing to see all of your passion, from husbandry to agriculture to raising families to starting small businesses. It's amazing to see all of us come here with a common goal, with different viewpoints on that. We talked permaculture sustainability a little bit. From a quick point of permaculture, you don't go with one system, we stack systems. We have multiple generations we want to cover. People need water now. If that's the water district, go for it. That's a good thing. Stack the systems, get the water to people now. We also want to have our water protected in the future. So I don't want to cut your water, I don't want to cut your water. You guys are here, you're part of our community, I want to support you, I want to protect you. But we have people coming in from California because they can't afford to live there anymore, buying up our land here because it's super cheap, and taking the water and sending their money back to their homes in California. We want to protect our community, the people that are here, the people that invested here, I want to protect those lands. We're talking about, so maybe an AMA, but we have to write it ourselves that suits our community. Talking about the sustainable agriculture, soil microscopy, roller crimping, cover crops. Another way that farmers can make an add money to their farm is sequestering carbon, build topsoil. We don't want to become Oklahoma and have a dust bowl. So we can roller crip, we can use those cover crops to do that, and you can get paid for that in the off season. That's added income to your pockets to support you guys as well. There's a lot of different systems. We can do rainwater harvesting, we can do rainwater catchment, we can do burns and swales, catch water up high, it's running out here, it's destroying our roads, it's causing huge things. We get a lot of water, we get it all at once, but it rips out of here and goes to the salt flats, and a lot of that evaporates and doesn't get a chance to percolate. So what we want to do is capture the water up high on all of our land, let that water percolate. It will charge our system faster than the current charging system. You guys are amazing, I'm exhausted.
Okay, just a last comment here. Okay, just a quick comment on last steps. Yeah, I think all of us can keep learning and sharing what.
Two things.
Learn and share what you know about this. Talk to your neighbors about it. We've got to come together.
Yeah, and there's some fans are
We have a new website, we just started, called CochiseWaterFuture.org. Use that as a reference. There's a lot of good reference information on there, media links. Gives you a lot of good information. We're going to keep adding to it. We look for suggestions. If you have some suggestions, contact us for what we can put on there, how we can bring the community together. As we already mentioned, that's your political leaders. I don't remember in the 2020 election any of our local politicians talking about water. I don't know why, but they weren't. They better be talking about water this coming November. So let them know that's important. Get involved with us if you like, or pick another group or whatever, but get involved as much as you can. A lot of you signed up for our contact list. We'll keep you informed about upcoming events and activities that might be pertinent. And maybe send you some information about that. And then, you know, we as a group say, you know, obviously, most of us I know in this room don't see doing nothing as not an option. And if that's not an acceptable option to you, which I believe it is, we encourage you to consider supporting the AMA. Petition, if you're in the Douglas Basin, sign the petition. If you're up here, vote yes on the ballot, because as Michael said, it's one of our first steps. And we can help create that AMA. And there will be opportunities to improve that law, I'm convinced, because we can't keep going the way we are. We're the first, we're trailblazers here. We will be the first to create an AMA in a rural area. We will not be the last, I guarantee it. So, take care. Thank you.